Well, welcome to the internal closed beta test of the Clot Thickens level designer by Freedom's MGN Studios. In about 2 or 3 weeks, we plan on releasing the level designer to the Freedom family in order to crowdsource levels for the Clot Thickens game, which we plan to release later this year. But what we need right now from you, Freedom staff and family and friends, is feedback. We'd like you to play the level designer, create levels, let us know if there's any problems when you're creating them. Also, send us your creative thoughts, and possibly also send us some of the files of your creative level designs as well. But again, remember that this is a beta test, so it is unoptimized, and there is some things that aren't functional yet. But none of those non-functioning items will impact your ability to create level designs. Now, it should work on all modern browsers. Of course, it's a good idea to update your browsers, like the new version of Chrome, which should load the game faster. And I also do want to give a shout out to Raphael and Karina, the programmer and artist on the Clot Thickens, and also to Ben and Tim and their crew at the Music Factory for creating this wonderful level designer theme. They've also created the Clot Thickens theme as well and are working on the gameplay music. So, let's begin. You'll notice when you open the level designer, there is this initial set of what looks like 2 circles and a character of some kind, and these 3 dots. So this is the player character. These are cells. These 2 are cells, and these are bubbles that can be collected. Now let's play so I can give you an idea of how it works. So we'll hit play here. Now you'll notice that the player character is moving around the cell, and I'm not doing anything at all. It's doing that automatically. And there are 2 functions I can perform. I can change the direction of the player, and I can do that if I'm using my mouse with the right mouse button. So when I press the right mouse button, it changes direction. Or if I want to use my keyboard, I can use either the left shift or the right shift to change direction. Now the only other operation I can do is to have the character jump. So with the mouse, I can press the left mouse button. Here we go. And I'm just going to shift directions here. I don't want to complete the cell yet. And I'll hit the left mouse button to jump right back again. Or if I'm using my keyboard, I can use a space bar and jump over there and jump back. Oh, well, I failed, so I restarted. So once again, keyboard, the shift keys are for change direction and the space bars to jump. If you're using your mouse, it's the right mouse button to change direction and the left mouse button to jump. Now, I'm going to complete the level by getting over to the next cell and jumping over. Now, I did miss those bubbles, so actually I'm going to try and hit a bubble or 2. Oh, here we try again. All right, I'll complete this level. Now, you'll see once I've completed the level, it's showing me that I've collected one of the bubbles. And what I can do now is I can stop. One thing I should say is, you'll notice when I was playing that some of the functionality has been grayed out. That's because I'm not actually able to modify the cells or the level while I'm playing, which would make sense. The only thing I can do is shut off the music, but I really like it, so I'm going to leave it on, and stop to go back to the level design. Alright, so what can I do? How can I change this? Well, I can do things like when I go over an object, it'll become a crosshair, and I can move the object, so I'll move these bubbles around, and let's say I want to move this cell around over here and this cell there, like get a good jump over here. So I'll play that, but what I think I will realize is that I can't reach it. And so let's say I don't want to move these back together. What I'd rather do is to put some new cells in there. So I can go over to the right menu. I can click and hold and grab a cell and bring it into the canvas here. And what I can do now is I can jump from this cell to that cell. And of course, try to infect all of them as well. Right, I'll stop that for now. Now let's say that, I don't really want the player where it is. I'd rather have the player on one of the other cells, so I can click and hold on the player, and it'll show me where I can move the player. So I can, let's say, start them in the middle here if I want, or start them there. But I'll put them in the middle for now, so that I can play that level. Now, we have different types of cells. So if you go over here to the right menu where the cell is, I can use these arrow keys to change the cell type. There's 4 different cell types. There's a normal cell, like we have here. It's essentially stationary, and it may wiggle a little bit, but essentially it's stationary. We also have moving cells. So I'll put that there, and what I can do is I can click on any of these waypoints and move them, and when I play, you'll see that the cell will oscillate back and forth between those waypoints, making it a little tougher to hit. Alright, now the other cell I have is a shrinking cell. Now this cell will stay stationary, but you'll see that when the player jumps onto that cell, it will start to shrink. Now the danger here, of course, is that if I stay on this cell a little too long, it'll shrink to nothing and my character will fall, potentially, to its doom. Now there may be another cell underneath it, and it may just fall into that cell. It depends on how you want it to create your level. Also, finally, we have moving shrinking cells. So once I add those in, you can see I can jump to that shrinking cell, but it will shrink as it's moving, so I have to be a little bit careful to make sure I jump off at the right time. Now, besides dragging these cells in, let's assume that I've created this level and I like it, but I really wish that this cell over here was a shrinking cell or a moving cell. Well, what I could do is drag it off and then drag on whatever I might. So I could drag this off, and in fact, I'm going to show you now how to delete. If you take an object and hold it over the trash, it will delete that object. So now I could replace it with this cell. But let's suppose that I've really spent some time thinking about this and I've created what I like, but I'd rather change it on the spot. You notice an icon up here. This is the change cell icon. If I click on that, it will show me the next cell it will change to. So, for example, I changed to a normal cell. You can see in the icon this looks like a moving normal cell, and that's what it is. Next icon is a shrinking cell. This is a moving shrinking cell. So I can change my cell types around by doing this as well. Now the other thing I can do with the cells is that I can change their size. So if I go onto the rim of a cell, just the edge there, I'll see that I get a different cursor now, which shows that I can actually pull and shrink and change the size of these cells. So I'll just change the size of a few of them here, and change this one over here, and change that one there. And of course now you can see that they'll have very different behaviors. I'm sorry, now by different behaviors, what I mean, of course, is that the larger the cell, you'll notice that the character has to move a little faster to get around it in the same amount of time it might get around a smaller cell. Alright, so let me delete again a few of these because I'm getting a little crowded here, so I can grab this cell and I can move it over to the trash. The trash will highlight, and it means I can delete it. So I will do that. Now, if I have a cell and I take it and I go somewhere over here, you'll notice it'll just snap to the edge or whatever is closest because I'm not actually deleting it. Also, if I take a waypoint, I can't delete the cell by its waypoint. It'll just snap back there. So I'm always grabbing the cell. Now, I cannot delete a cell with a player on it. It will snap right back. I also cannot delete a player. And I also cannot delete these bubbles, right? Because these are the basic bonuses that we want to have, and we always want to have 3 of those. All right, so that's how cells work. Now let's take a look at enemies, because it might be maybe a little too easy for me to be able to, let's see, just go back and forth from there. Let me get rid of that guy here. All right. Let me change this back, because that initial moving cell is making it tough for me. All right. So there's also 2 sets of enemies. So I'll grab and drag this enemy over here. And now what'll happen is, if I hit that enemy, I will perish. So I want to avoid those enemies. And those enemies are going to move and spring back and forth along these waypoints. And the way they work is they actually will accelerate towards the final waypoint and decelerate back. So if you watch its movement, it accelerates there and bounces right back again. Now what I can do is I can move these waypoints. Now the longer they are, the faster they'll start to move down that waypoint. So it'll move there and back. So I can change the direction of these, and I can form some pretty interesting patterns by moving these waypoints around and trying to basically block some of the paths between some of these cells. Alright. Now what else can I do? Of course I can delete enemies by dragging them here. I'm dragging the enemy back again. What else I can do with these enemies? Well, I can also, for this enemy, change its speed. It has an independent speed. So the way I change the speed is I hover over the enemy, and then I hover over the speed I want. Right now it's at normal speed. 2 is normal. I can go down and make it slower, and I'll play that, and it'll move a lot slower. Well, I'll be careful hitting that right away. And I can also make it quite a bit faster by increasing its speed to its maximum. and that will move it faster than it would have moved before. Alright, so let's see, I've got that enemy there. I also have another type of enemy which encircles cells. So I'll change that enemy over here, and I will place it on one of these cells. That one, it'll snap to it. And now when I play, you'll see that that enemy will encircle that cell. Now with moving cells, it has a very interesting pattern. Let me just take it and change this cell to a non-moving one, just so you can actually see. So there we go. So of course now it's a little bit of a barrier. If I want to try and jump to that cell, I'm going to have to time things better. Now what can I do with these types of enemies? Well, I can also hover and change their speed, so I can increase the speed to be faster, and they'll circle the cell faster. I can, when I get a crosshair, take these enemies and move them to another cell and snap them there. Right, so I'll just snap this one right back again here. I can snap it to any one of these and just snap it back. And what I can also do is I can also grab this enemy. Oops, let me grab him. There we go. When I grab the center of it, I can actually decide where that enemy will start. Now for these other linear enemies, I can basically move them around to kind of change where they're starting. But what I can't do right now is move them along this path in terms of a start. Mainly because of how their behavior works with respect to springing back and forth. Now what else can I do with these circular enemies besides changing their position around the circle or their speed? I can also change their direction with these arrows. So if I click on these arrows, you'll see that now I'll reverse the direction of that enemy. Alright, so those are our enemies and our cells. Well, what else can I do? Well, I can also change the background. So perhaps you like different types of backgrounds that you want to play with. So I'll change it over to, I'll use this background now. Alright, the other thing I can also do is change the overall game speed. So healthy, right, our body here is healthy with its cells, that's our normal speed. But what I can also do if I want to create a level which is a little easier is I can slow it down to what we've called lethargic. And that will slow the play down, you know, enough that it might make it a little easier for novice players or earlier levels, for example. And I'll speed that now back up to the normal speed. I can also increase that speed by clicking on this arrow to distressed. So now it'll move a little faster than it was before. Or I can go to feverish. And now this is going to definitely add a challenge to be able to complete this level. As you can see me challenged right here. Alright, I will stop that. And again, I can take, by the way, this enemy, and I can grab the enemy and I can move it here and delete it. Right, and I can add another one in here. Now here's the fun part, of course, is I can add more of these. Now these are on top of each other, but I can select one and move it out, and select one and move it in. So, yes, I missed that. The resizing capability of the circular cells. I can resize them to a certain maximum or a certain minimum. And so you can, of course, create some pretty funky kind of examples where I can reverse some of these. Let me move this cell down so you can see it. I can change the speed of these differently. Let's put a maximum speed there. I can also grab them and change the start positions. And of course now I can end up getting something which is, you know, quite fun and challenging in order to be able to thread that needle to jump. And I'm not even going to keep trying to do this, am I? Alright, I'll stop that. Let's get this back down to the healthy level here. So that's the functionality of being able to create. You can drag these around, we can grab new ones in, we can change the ones that are there. Right, we can change their size, we can grab more enemies and fill the population with enemies and create a lot of different things like this that are going to be interesting and challenging to play. Alright, I will stop that now. Now, what other functionality do I have here? I also have the functionality, now I have functionality for files. So let's say you've created this great level and you don't want to now quit the game and restart it next time. What you can do is you can save the level. So right now if I hit save, I will get a dialog box that will let me know that because of the way browsers save, it's going to be saved to your default browser location using level.tct as the default file name. Now if another file already exists because you've saved this already, you've saved a prior one, it will basically increment its version. So it'll either put, for Chrome, a version number within round brackets. For things like Safari, it may put a dash version number after it. But this is basically telling you that this is what it's going to do because it's not allowing me right now the choice to save it to a particular file name. or replace a file that exists. But what I can do is I can go into my settings for my web browser. So right now I'm going to save that. But what I can do is I can go into Chrome here and look at its preferences. And for its preferences, if I scroll down, and Safari and Firefox will have their own version of this, I can see that I've decided to have, I'm Dave Fracchia, by the way, my files go to my Downloads Level Designer as a default. Of course, I can change that, but I can also change ask where each file is saved before downloading. And again, every browser has this version, so I'll do that, and I'll leave here. So now if I say save, it'll come up with this dialog again, but it should, there we go, allow me to, for example, save something to another one. So if this was the same level as I'd saved before and I'd made a change, I can click on that, I can save, and I can replace that level. All right, now what I can also do is, now that I've saved this level, is I can load a level. So what I'm going to do is go and load something I just called over the top, although I think what I have is quite over the top as well. So, you know, here's an example of one I created that might be a little challenging to play. And again, I'm not suggesting that this will be in the final game, of course, because this just might be a little over the top. All right. Let's say, you know, I've loaded that and I've decided, okay, well, I don't want to save that anymore and I don't have other ones to load. I want to start fresh again. So what I can do is I can hit new, and because I've already had that file saved, then I can start with a new one. Now, let me just load up. Now, one thing you'll notice here is because I've now loaded up the default as a new, and I'm about to load a different file, it will ask me if I haven't saved the current level, whether I wish to save it or not. And I can say yes, and it'll save this to a level. So if I say yes, this dialog will come up. I can, in this case, because I'm going to be asked every time, ask not for this message to be shown again, and I can take that and overwrite that level I had before, save that and replace it, or I've created a new level, and now I can go ahead and play with this level. Now, if you're going to be sending us any files, you can save or send them as .tct files to us, and we can load them and we can play your version that you've created. Now, as I mentioned before, we've got the file saving and loading and new working. We have the play working. We can turn on and off the music. What is not functioning? Well, help is not functioning, hence this video, and submit is not functioning. And submit is how the level designers from the Freedom family are going to submit levels to us. What's also not here is a replay button. We're also going to be saving actions so that if you complete a level, you can replay it, which is super handy and be able to video record and capture a play and be able to play it back, or to be able to save it to your YouTube channel, for example. So that is the level designer. Enjoy. We're looking forward to your feedback, and we're looking forward to the release of the final game. Thanks, and bye.